Hey guys, I'm Jessie, and today I am doing my January reading wrap up. January was a really good reading month. I had a lot of fun with pretty much every single book I read. I don't think I read anything that was like below 4 stars, and that's a feat right there, right? Like, because a lot of times I'll pick up books that are like, oh, this sounds cool, and then like it completely lets me down. But honestly, everything I read this month, I would recommend. And also, I read a lot of self-published fantasy this month, which really excites me to talk about because one of my goals this year was to read more self-published fantasy and like review it and put that out there so more people can pick it up, because I think these self-published fantasy books are like hidden gems most of the time. We don't get enough like hype around some of these self-published books that, you know, people pour their like blood, sweat, and tears into. And since they're not with like a large publishing house, they don't get as much oomph behind them, right? Every once in a while, we'll get a self-published fantasy book that like blows up, so like Sword of Kaigen, and it just goes viral and makes its rounds and everybody ends up reading it. But 9 times out of 10, these self-published fantasy books just really fly under the radar. And a lot of the ones that I read this month have very few reviews on Goodreads, and honestly, that needs to change because they were all so good and I'm excited to talk about them. Alright, so let's jump into everything that I read in the month of January. Starting out strong, I did finish Oathbringer, but really it was like the last few pages of Oathbringer that I finished in January. Most of that was read in the month of December. I think I finished like the last like 20 or 30 pages. So really, I'm not going to talk about that one too much. I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. It was fantastic. I know it seems to be not everyone's like favorite Stormlight book, but I really liked it. I really liked the Dalinar flashbacks. So yeah, I gave that one 5 stars. Absolutely loved Oathbringer. Now for the first book that I started and finished in the month of January is Dawn Shard. This is the short story novella set between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. I read this because it was part of the Cosmere Crab-Along, and we did live shows. We talked about all of the Cosmere books. Like the past 13 months, we read the entire Cosmere. It was an insane process, but it was so much fun just reading a Cosmere book every month and talking with everybody. So I'll still leave that Discord down below because it is still on and poppin'. We are going to have like a little Cosmere Crab get together when The Lost Metal comes out later this year. So we'll be reading that together as well as doing another live show probably. So be on the lookout for that. But Dawn Shard was really fun. It really opened up a lot of the characters. We get Lopin, and I absolutely love Lopin. Like, he is hysterical and probably one of my favorite Bridge 4 characters. I just love him. And we get a lot of opening up of the world. Different characters. We learn a lot of new things. I can't really say too much because, you know, spoilers for the Cosmere. But just know that this is required reading. I don't recommend going from Oathbringer straight to Rhythm of War. Definitely read the novellas. Just like you needed to read Edge Dancer before Oathbringer, you need to read Dawn Shard before you read Rhythm of War. Moving on from that, can you guess what I read next? Can you guess? Probably. I finished Rhythm of War. Oh, y'all. Okay. I know that, again, like Oathbringer, this isn't a lot of people's favorites. I heard people saying that, like, it was probably their least favorite Stormlight book, and, like, the pacing was slow. I did not find any of those problems. I adored it. There are so many moments in this book that just hooked me. I love the deeper stories we get for Shallan. We get more of Navani's story, and we develop her a lot more. And honestly, I never hated Navani, but like I never cared much about her that much until this book. This book made me love Navani. And then, of course, we get Kaladin, and we get so much more of Kaladin's story, his backstory. We get more of just his raw emotions and what he's going through. And I absolutely love Kaladin's character development in this. And we get Parshindy, listener, singer, flashbacks. I know that this is one of the things that people hated, was all the weird flashbacks with the different listeners, but I loved it. Because we get to see a different side of this story. We get to see this story basically from a different people's perspective. Because most of the time we are following humans, right? We are following humans in this war. But in this one, we get the side of the listeners. And we get more of the fused. And we learn more about them and the shards. And it's so good. And y'all, the Cosmere connections in this blew my mind. There were a couple where I'm like, oh, I think that is this person. Because, you know, they have, like, different names, right? Like, in Roshar, they'll have a different name than in, you know, whatever their other planet is in other Cosmere books. And you're like, that sounds like this person. Is that this person? And then by the end, you're like, oh my God! Like, that's this person! And you're, like, blown away. So, like, there are so many Cosmere connections with Elantris, with Warbreaker, with the Mistborn series. Like, all of them pop up in this book. There are connections to everything in this book with the Cosmere. The ending, and the epilogue has me both excited and super scared for when book 5 comes out. Because book 5 is going to be like the culmination of this arc. So this is going to be a 10-book series with 2 5-book arcs. So I'm like, how? I don't understand, like, what is going to happen, because everything that happens in this book it's like, I don't know how he's gonna finish this, how he's gonna wrap up this arc. Like, I'm terrified, but it was good. I gave it 5 stars, if you can't tell. I loved it, and I cannot wait. I think the next Stormlight book is supposed to come out in 2023. So fingers crossed, keep on writing, Sanderson, because we excited. All right, the rest of the books that I read were all self-published fantasy books, and they were all so good. Y'all, I can't keep hyping these up. So the first one was, I did end up finishing Winds of Strife. I know you've probably seen this on like a million of my TBRs and videos, and it's like, I'm gonna finish it. Well, I finally finished it. This was probably one of my, like, least favorites, but it was still a 4-star book, so, like, can you say that it's your least favorite when it was still really good? But I really enjoyed this book more than I really expected to. There were definite moments where I'm like, I don't know, because I'm a character-driven reader, and I did not like any of the characters, but they're not supposed to be likable, so, like, that's fine. Like, obviously, I can get behind an unlikable character. I adored Rin in the Poppy War, and she's, like, the epitome of an unlikable character. But our main character in this, Nye, is both awesome and terrible, and he's crazy. Like, he hears voices, literally called the Madness. But the magic system in this is what really made it for me. They have this, like, weird magic system where it is all based around emotions and harnessing your emotions and utilizing your emotions for power. And we get to see a lot of different ways that people use different emotions. And in this book, also, women using magic is, like, outlawed. They track down the witches. Our lead guy is a witch hunter, but he is secretly infiltrating the witch hunters because he wants to kill the king and, like, free women, because he was actually attacked by the group of, like, witch hunters when he was young, and they killed, like, his whole family and his girlfriend, and he's, like, deep undercover, right? So, like, he does go out and, like, murder these witches, but he saves who he can and kind of, like, recruits them into his, like, gang of secret society ladies that are gonna take down the king one day. And there's so much going on in this book. It did take me a little while to get through it, just because it's a thicken, but it's also very, very detailed. But I highly recommend this, especially if you like morally gray, leaning to unlikable characters. I really recommend this. It's on Kindle Unlimited, And I picked up this beautiful edition because, like, that cover, come on. And we all know that I love a villain slash anti-hero story, and this did give that to me. I think the reason that I bumped it down from 5 to 4 stars was just because I couldn't super like any of the characters. Like, they all have something about them that I'm like, ugh, but I still really liked the story, like, overall. And I'm excited to see what happens next. I know he's going to be writing a second book, and I'm going to need that second book when it comes out because I need to know what's going to happen next, especially after that epilogue. That epilogue in this book had me hooked for, like, another book because it's like it ends to where it could be a standalone, right? Like, it ends. But the epilogue is what you're like, oh, shit, okay, what's happening here? What's gonna go on? So I'm really, really excited. I really enjoyed this. I recommend this one. Pick it up. Winds of Strife by Yuji Goodman. Another one I read that I gave 5 stars is Immortal Sands. This is by Mackenzie Megan. This is actually the either sister or sister-in-law, I think sister, of Stephanie from Stephanie's Bookverse. And she sent this to me, and I was so excited. I jumped right into this book and ate it up. I loved it. It is a more YA fantasy, but it reminded me a lot of The Prison Healer in different ways. Like, not in plot or anything like that, but like just in vibes, I guess. But it really reminded me of The Prison Healer. So we have this girl who is arrested at the very, very, very beginning of the story, before the story even starts, for killing a member of, like, the royal family. But he had, like, attacked her, and it was self-defense, but, like, they didn't care. They had a sham of a trial. She went to, like, a death prison, and she manages to escape, like, the only person to escape within, like, 1,000 years. And she goes on this quest to basically bring down this family that is, like, the ruling noble family, because they are, like, literally cast this spell that is, like, controlling everybody. And we have some really great characters in this. The magic is really cool. There's, like, different kinds of magic, and I really loved it. And at the end of this book, I was texting Stephanie on Instagram, and I was like, girl, I just bought book 2. Like, it is here. It is at my house because I need to know what happened. Book 2 is already out. I have not read it yet. I didn't check to see if this is on Kindle Unlimited or not. It might be, but you can look. Don't quote me on that. I love Kindle Unlimited for finding self-pub offers, by the way. And, like, they get paid per page you read. So it is a good way to support self-published authors if you have Kindle Unlimited. But I, of course, had to have these hardbacks, and it's so pretty. I have book 2 somewhere over here. I plan on reading that very soon because, like, I need to know things. I have ideas, and I need to know them. There is not a super heavy romance in this book, so I really appreciated that. Like, they're more focused on, like, moving the plot forward and, like, doing what they gotta do than, like, your typical YA, like, romance. Like, and I think this one really borders between YA and adult. Like, it's YA-ish, but it's elevated. Like, it's older. So it's, like, older YA, definitely leaning more towards adult. Had a great time with this one, so pick this one up. Then I read another self-published book. This is an adult fantasy that was also sent to me by the author, and that is Between Star Falls by S. Keith. This one was also really good. I gave it 4 stars. Had such a good time reading it. We have a mother character as the main character of this book. And if you have watched any of my videos, you know that is one of my favorite things. I love seeing a mom. She is a younger mom too. So she's, like, in her 20s, and she's an adoptive mom. So she didn't actually, like, birth this child, her son. She adopted him as a baby, and it is so good. Seeing their relationship, her relationship with her friends. So they live in this book in, like, tribal communities, right? But the whole thing is, like, there's this mountain path, and you can't wander off the path or else you're basically going to be, like, disowned and by your whole tribe. So some things happen. They're attacked. She ends up kind of going off with her son on this journey ahead of the rest of the tribe because they do this like yearly like kind of pilgrimage and all the tribes meet up. So during her pilgrimage, her son goes missing. Her and her friends and her older brother end up trying to find him and getting captured by these people that live in the mountain. And they have to end up living as like servants. And she ends up being kind of like outcast to this like city of the lost. And it is so good. Like, is it perfect? No. But it is so good. And I love that it shows our main character as not perfect. Like, ends up very, like, broken and beaten down, and, you know, she's struggling. And I really find it interesting that in this book, like, people with magic, like our main character that's, like, telepathic, things like that, they're used to protect their tribes, but they're also looked down upon because they have magic. So it's like a love-hate, like, we get that we need you, but we don't really want you. So I really like this. I also have book 2 that I need to read, so real excited to see what happens, because again, the end of this had me like, what? Like, I was not expecting it, so definitely pick up this one. Again, didn't look to see if it's on Kindle Unlimited, but you can look. I highly recommend this one. And then the final self-published book, the final book that I read is The Rave by J.R. Trez. I have been wanting to read this forever, and technically I finished this in February, but like, I just finished it, and we're going to talk about it because it was started in January, but technically finished in February. This is like an urban fantasy-esque book, and y'all, I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it, and I need book 2. Where is book 2? I need to know what happens after the end of this. Like, come on, give it to me. But we're following this girl, Alina, and her grandfather goes missing, and he is like her only family. So she's kind of left with his like dilapidated martial arts school, no money, no family, and she is a monster hunter. And she's not like a registered monster hunter, so she's like doing it on the sly. And come to find out, there is like this huge, what they call them, raves, which is hysterical to me. But they call them raves, and that's like these big like monster hunting expeditions. So she forges a license, travels to the capital where there's not supposed to be any monsters, but there's like this like big bad monster, like, you know, destroying the city and killing nobles. So she like risks everything on this trip and, you know, going up there to slay this monster with all the others and, you know, wanting to get the bounty. So she's competing against other monster slayers, but also herself. And it's so good, y'all. Like, it's so hard to explain this one. And this, like, city is trippy. So how you see it on the cover is, like, how it is. So if you're in this part of the city, you are looking up at the earth below you, and it is so trippy. And the way it's described is really, really cool. I think it's really vivid in the way, like, things and places are described. You can visualize it really, really well. And like I said, it's trippy. You're, like, looking up in the sky, and the ground is below you. So love that. We also have, like, you know, lots of monsters and monster hunter stuff. And then there's a very slight potential romance-esque moment. But again, not a romance-heavy book, not a romance-focused book. Like, kind of really deviates from your typical, like, YA, and the fact that, like, romance is not even really a subplot, which, thank you. I love that. We don't always need a romance in the midst of, like, this big murdery, mystery, monstery, magical thing, right? Like, there's politics, and it's very much a sci fantasy, I would say, because there's a lot of discussions of, like, internet and tech, and, like, there's like cyborg-esque stuff where they put, like, stuff in your head, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. Like, alterations. And then there's what they call the dark threads, which reminded me so much of, like, the dark web. And yeah, it's definitely a sci fantasy. I gave this 5 stars. I need book 2. I need it so much, especially after the end. And I'm like, again, all of these have endings that are not like cliffhangers, but like just hook you and you're like, okay, now I need to know what happens next. Like, I need this. But yeah, another self-published book that I gave like 5 stars to. Go pick this one up. All right, hopefully you enjoyed this. I read some amazing books. You know, I finished Stormlight Archives. I read a bunch of self-published fantasy that I really want to hype up because I think it's a good thing to go read more self-published fantasy. Like, we all are on here talking about super hyped books already, popular books, but like reading a self-published book and reviewing it, even just giving it just a star rating on Goodreads or posting it on your Instagram or whatever, really means so much and helps out these self-published authors because they have, like I said, poured their blood, sweat, and tears into these books and gotten editors and really great cover designs. And, you know, they work so hard and they don't have these big publishing houses behind them. So highly recommend you know, pick up some of these books or other self-published books. I love everything that I've read this month, so I'm definitely wanting to read more self-pub, hype up more self-pub, and of course, you know, I just want to talk about really good fantasy books, and this was a good month for my reading. All right, well, thank you guys for hanging out with me. My name is Jessie, and I will see you next time. Bye.